Today we will go into the core part of internal security. Today we are going to discuss much about border management and the issues related to border management and organized crime, which is related to border management, and how the organized crime turns into transnational crime and the linkages between the border management and transnational crime. And we will also go into some important transnational crimes like drug trafficking, and then maritime security and environmental terrorism. So these are a variety of topics which we are going to discuss today. And in this, we can see that a different scenario exists. And in that particular different scenario, we can see a quite large number of perspectives which are there with linking to internal security. So before going to the details, we'll see some questions which they have asked. There are quite a large number of questions in this particular area. They were one, examining the challenges which we are facing in border management, especially with Myanmar, and how it could be done away with, and CPEC as a threat. Okay, so how it is a threat and how it's going to be a problem. And then what do you mean by airspace? So implication of airspace. This is actually, India had a integrated airspace policy, that is civil and military airspace. So a common airspace policy and free airspace policy. So at that time in 2013, the policy was unveiled, so it was asked. And some illegal border migration, what is the cause for it? What are all the factors that give impetus? And similarly, how internal security is threatened by its maritime policies or issues. And again, the economic corridor, how it becomes a security threat, and elucidate challenges and strategies for effective border management. So you can see quite large number of things which are there, and how drug trafficking and money laundering, this we also saw yesterday. The same question is repeating here because of the transnational crime what we have. So these are some of the questions which are directly linked to these, and through the discussion you can avail some answers to these questions. So to start with, we can see that the international border is a really tricky, sticky thing what we have on part of India. So according to Ministry of Home Affairs, so these are the statistics what we have. So though we are not going to be bothered about large amount of stat, but we can get an idea about how it is. So India has both land border and coastal border. And you can see that 16 states and 2 union territories, that is Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, have land border. And 9 states from Gujarat to West Bengal have coastal border, with 4 union territories in this order. So we can see as far as the international border, land border is concerned, we have around 15,000 kilometers land border, and as far as coastal border is concerned, we have around 7,516, right? So Andaman and Nicobar has the longest coastal length, border length, followed by Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala, and others, right? But on mainland, you can see one of the top contributors to the economy, like Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, okay, so Kerala, Andhra Pradesh. So all these have coastal areas. So coastal areas are very important for GDP as well as trade for any country. And naturally, we also have some issues tied up with that. And similarly, you can see Bangladesh having the longest international border shared with India, followed by China. So almost the major part of this 3,488 kilometers are disputed, and we have near borderline with Pakistan, highly disturbed, always witnessing infiltration, and we have Nepal, Myanmar, and Bhutan, which has a similar kind of ethnic systems. And Afghanistan, we claim, though it is in Indo-Pakistan disputed territories, but still we claim to be having 106 kilometers, which are there with Afghanistan. So in that way, uh, we have a quite a huge border, and the very nature of the border, you can see um, from the outset itself. This is marsh terrain, Ran of Kutch. This is hot desert, Thar desert. We have mountainous terrains from this region to this region, the Kirpanjal ranges, Zaskar ranges, Ladakh ranges, and so on, the Himalayas, the northwestern Himalayas. So rugged terrain. And then we have the Indo-China border, which is going to be completely with the Himachal region, snow-clad. And then the river boundaries and river borders of Bangladesh. And you know that Brahmaputra has around 17 kilometers width. So width itself is 17 kilometers. So in that way, such a huge rivers which forms borders with between two nations, and not only that, Sundarbans. So one of the most important forest, mangrove forest, which has acts as a border. We have thick jungles, right, in the northeast, which is the source of the most notorious malaria. So which creates a really troublesome issue. And apart from that, we have coastal line, which is porous. So from the hot desert to the cold desert of Ladakh, from the marshy terrain to the terrains of mangroves, from the hilly mountains to the thick jungles, and to the India has multiplicity of border issues. And the very nature of the geography, the geography of the border itself is something diverse. Okay, so we need to have some specialized forces. We need to have some specialized organizations to master these geographical terrain to protect the territory of India. So that itself, at the prima facie, we have certain issues in border, right? And all these border have disputes also. So that's another important thing what we have. Fine. So as far as border management, the guarding forces, who guards where? Bangladesh and Pakistani borders are guarded by Border Security Force. They are the first line of defense. This is the largest border security force in the world, and it also has all three wings: Army wing, Navy wing, and Air Force wing of BSF. Okay, and they provide assistance for Army. So the BSF is going to be the first line of defense, seconded by Indian Army in these borders, especially in Pakistan. And for China border, after Indo-China war, we had a special police force, Indo-Tibetan Border Police. They are famous for the mountaineering, mountain warfare. So for this mountain warfare, we have Indian Tibetan Border Police. Nepal and Bhutan borders, which are porous borders, there is free flow of people will be there. Sahastra Sima Bal is the one which, again, formed after Sino-India War. They guard the borders. Myanmar border is done by the Assam Rifles, the Sentinel of the East. And this is the oldest serving paramilitary force what we have in India. So they were formed as early as 1830s, and they guard there. Okay, so apart from that, in the LOC and LAC, there is line of control and line of actual control. Indian Army assists these border security force in the back end, and Indian Navy has overall maritime security. They are supported by Indian Coast Guards, right? Who are the first line of defense in the coastal space. And then we have airspace. the three-dimensional space in the atmosphere over the territory of India. Indian Air Force follows a flexible use of airspace policy 2013, where the civil and military are simultaneously operated in the airspace. So these are some of the guarding borders or the areas where we border in this particular aspect, what we have. Okay. Okay. So apart from these aspect, what do you call the who guards what? Some common issues, what we have. Okay. So the majority of the issues which come up with the border uh, within the territories of India is unsettled boundary sections. So we have some boundary issues with Pakistan in Sar Creek, right, in Gujarat, and we have Siachen Glacier. Apart from that, the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So these three parts. Whereas with China in LAC, that is Ladakh region, the Siachen, the Aksai, and in Arunachal Pradesh territory, where they say Arunachal Pradesh, majority of the part of Arunachal Pradesh is China, right? Apart from that, there are some disputes with Nepal. You can see them. All these disputes you can learn in foreign policy, the Kalapani, the Lipuga, and so on. Bhutan, Doklam, and those regions. Bangladesh, we have some issues, but it has been resolved by exchange of enclaves. So in all these spaces, we have disputes between these territories. With Sri Lanka, we had some, or we still have some issues, or perceived to have some issues with Kachativu region and the cross maritime boundary shootings upon the Indian fishermen. So all these are some issues which we have, which are unsettled, and naturally they are unresolved, and in that particular way, they trigger the border problems. And we have hostility among the neighbors, like we have hostile neighbors like Pakistan, China, who try to create these boundary issues and try to be hostile forever. And then we have diverse and difficult terrain, so which we discussed in the first instance itself, from different types of geographical terrain and the difficulty of terrain, uh, mastering them, understanding them, coping up with them, living with them is a difficult task. And say, for example, BSF, which borders, what do you call, Bengal, it has to traverse through the thick jungles of, what do you call, thick jungles of, your Sundarbans, and then they have their own complete vest from the head to toe. They'll just have a net dress. Okay, so they will just cover with the mosquito net, and they need to walk through the jungles of Bangladesh and then cross rivers using boats. Then they need to have some helicopter monitoring in certain areas. So multiple terrain, multiple difficulties which are there with the BSF. Then another critical problem is underdeveloped border areas. Both uh, the sides of the border areas are really underdeveloped. Okay, not only with the growth or development in the space, and also with the infrastructure. So connectivity is one major problem what we have. Say, for example, reaching the space in this region, Golan Heights and other, the springs and other areas. Naturally, the Daulat Beg road and so on, which was developed. So these are addressing certain connectivity issues, but there are largely some connectivity issues not only in the northeast, the northern part, but also in the northeastern part in India. So there are many such problems we have. Say, for example, here the infrastructures are very difficult because it is engulfed by marshy terrain, that is the backwaters from the sea enters and then recedes, and it is infested with crocodiles, so marsh crocodiles, which are highly dangerous. So we need to cope up with that. That's a problem what we have, right? And the poor connectivity does matter, because when enemies uh, infiltrate, we need to reach them, and we need to reach on time and attack them. Then insecure nature of the border population, that's a problem, because in India, what the issue is that when border is there, this border population whom they survive, they have to face the attack of both the sides. So the Indian army forces, which they actually uh, don't believe them, okay, because we think that they harbor the enemies there. The enemies, they think they are the informers for the Indian army. So the insecure nature of these population is very, very difficult. Say, for example, Bakarwal community, which lives on a nomadic life. What do you call the pastoralism. So it's very difficult for them to cope up with when they had some issues of restrictions in Ladakh and so on. The productivity comes down. So naturally, there is a problem what they have. And depopulating border areas. Many remote areas, the population is depopulating, and they come down to plains and they relocate in some other areas to get rid of these security problems. So when people are not there, automatically the encroachments happen from the enemy side. And illegal migrations, altering demographics, naturally that's a problem, especially in the northeastern terrain. So this is one of the crucial problems or issues what we have. Then we have rampant smuggling and other crimes which are happening across border, drug trafficking and so on. So such a serious issues what we have. So all these are common issues what we feel or what we have felt in this particular border management as such. Clear? Fine. So what are the common issues? These common issues are there, but what security threat they provide us? Okay, so these are some of the issues, but how the issues becomes threat. So when naturally when migration happens, when there are some insecure local population, when there are poor connectivity, they are having a fertile ground for terrorist ideas, radicalization. So naturally, cross-border terrorism increases with infiltration, right? And when infiltration increases, the state actors or non-state actors become more pervasive and prevalent there in the border areas. So when they are prevalent, they create cells that attack Indian establishments. And that's how these cells will act as a bridge between the narcotics and arms smugglers and the traders within the country. So this is how the things happen. Okay. Say for example, drugs, arms, ammunitions are, I mean, are smuggled through ships. Okay, so the sheeps which are used by the nomads are misused by the terrorists. How? The sheeps will have more wool. So underneath the wool, they will just tie the what do you call the drugs or arms and ammunition, so that the sheep when goes from one area to another area, it can easily transport, and it will be hidden in the woolen coat of the sheep. So that's idea how they use. So there are many such things happen, and there are many new methods also. Say for example, pigeons. Okay, so we saw that large number of pigeons cross border. Okay, so when the security persons, BSF people, initially they casually didn't address it, but once in a while they could see that there was a pattern in the pigeons moving. Not all pigeons are moving across borders, so they had an instinct that it's something fishy, and they started following it up, and they found that pigeons are used as spies, right? So these pigeons, when they were catched up, caught up by these personnel, they found high tech cameras tied in their legs. Okay, so It could picturize entire buildings in and around Delhi, Punjab, border areas, and so on. So there are many methods in which the infiltrations and threats come in, right? Never ever we thought pigeons can be used in that way. So it was used. So likewise, birds of prey and so on. Many things have been in this way. So they encourage illegal migration, left-wing extremism, separatism. Everything is having a link with the border, whether it is east, west, wherever it is. Apart from that, we have some challenges in border management as such. When there are some issues, when there are some threats coming from the issues, what problem we have with the border management? As far as border management is concerned, there are divided responsibilities. You can see that we involve BSF, we involve ITBP, we involve Shastra Seema Bal, we involve what do you call Assam rifles and so on. When there are multiple commands, there will be multiple control systems. So naturally, coordination is very difficult. Okay, and we don't have any doctrinal concept of border management. There is no doctrine which we have for border. Okay, so border doctrine is absent in India. So that's another problem. And there is no accountability vested upon the security forces for illegal encroachments by them or upon them. So both the ways we don't have any accountability. Poor intelligence in border areas. Okay, in border areas we have very poor intelligence, especially when Chinese and all these construct dams. Only when things go out of proportion, then only we could understand that things are worsening there, right? And these security persons, they never have enough handling of local sensitivities. They just bulldoze local sensitivities, and naturally, the local population and the security personnel have a very tough relation. So the alienation of the people happens, and naturally, the people try to either go hand in glove with the enemy or they try to keep aloof. And they never, even if they know things, they don't inform the local police or the security personnel at large. And mostly our policies towards border management is more a firefighting approach rather than fire prevention or proactive approach. That is, only when things worsen, we react. Okay. So there is no response rather than reaction. So we should not be reactive, we should be responsive. But in that way, we lack responsiveness in prevention of border issues or border things. We don't sense it in that way. So basically, we are into reaction mode and retaliation mode rather than proactive mode or fire prevention mode. So naturally, there is wastage of efforts and energy when there are multiplicity happening in this way. But the counter argument, what they try to make it out is that every force has its own uniqueness. Every force is unique in its own aspect for the terrain what we have. So ITBP cannot be replaced by BSF because of this fundamental aspect, and Assam Rifle cannot be replaced by SSB in some other reason. But anyway, whatever may be, the command and control are different. Say, for example, Assam Rifles, the supply of armed forces comes from Ministry of Defense, whereas it reports to Ministry of MHA. That's a problem. If you want to have it in MHA, have it in MHA. If you want to have it in MOD, have to shift to MOD. So that's a problem. ITBP does an army job, but they are police actually. But they are doing army job, but they are police, but they are not under military department. They are under Ministry of Home Affairs. So these type of command and control is a problem. It is not the specialization what is the problem, right? So these type of structural issues have to be sorted out, and then only the problem will be done. Because all these are central police force that we'll see when we talk about the police personnel. So they are not armed police personnel. They are neither paramilitary nor armed police. They armed military. They are actually police, right? That's a problem. But anyway, let's see how things are. So how to manage them? We manage international borders with outposts, okay? And we have outposts with battalions there. we have modernized fencing, especially Pakistan, completely laser fenced with the lasers, so infiltration can be given alert. And in Bangladesh also, we have almost completed a large section of more than 60-70% have been completed with the fencing. And we also have integrated border management system. That is, it is not only military, it is also for civil border, the transportation, the trade, commerce, migration, everything, customs, everything integrated into one border system so that all of them can have a light upon them. And floodlighting. What is floodlighting? You have borders, right? And all these borders, you have a very large pillars having the floodlights. So complete lighting system will be there for a particular distance, so that there won't be any problem of darkness for infiltration and so on. So complete flood lighting will be there. And border connectivity, especially road, rail, and air connectivity, especially to the Himalayan states, northeast, are improvised, so that we can easily access, especially military can easily access. You may know the Chardham project, where the defense accessibility to the Ladakh region is being increased. And then especially we implement a core centrally sponsored scheme called Border Area Development Program, under which the essential infrastructure of all nature is going to be provided in these border areas. If it is going to be northeastern region and Himalayan states, or what do you call Jammu and Kashmir and so on, so it is 90:10. 90% of the fund will be given by the center and 10% by the state or the UT. Whereas for other states, it is going to be 60-40 ratio. Whereas for central Ladakh, it is 100%. So this is how we have border area management schemes which are implemented, so that these challenges or problems what we are facing, the underdevelopment in the border areas, depopulation and so on, all of the stuff will be done away with, right? Then, so these are some of the issues with border management, especially land border. And now to marine border. Marine border is something which is very significant, because such a long border which is porous. That's very important. And maritime is directly linked to blue economy. India has a very high potential of blue economy. So what is blue economy? Blue economy primarily involves fishing. And you know that India has fishing, and India is one of the second largest inland fishing market in in the world, and it's also one of the largest fish markets with respect to marine in the world. So earning foreign exchange reserves, is one of the main core aspects of fishing, and we do that. And marine is also famous for its biotechnology, deep sea bed mining, and renewable energy which we get from marine. We have marine manufacturing, that is minerals. Using minerals, we use marine manufacturing, shipping, maritime logistics, tourism, construction industry, commerce, geoinformatics, education and research. All these involves maritime. So for that, security is very, very important. And Indian Ocean, the ocean named after India, needs India's presence. So the security of this Indian Ocean, which is the energy corridor, naturally becomes one of the most important aspect. Okay, so it's a high energy corridor. So piracy is also there at large in Indian Ocean, especially in the Somalian region, in the Malacca Strait, and so on. So providing a guarantor of security, free navigation, India has to improve security in its maritime borders. So there are some changing dynamics also in the terms of maritime securities. What are they? There are 4 regions, right? One is Persian Gulf, another one is South Asia, Southeast Asia, Eastern Africa. Okay, these are linked to Indian Ocean. The Persian Gulf, Eastern Africa are notorious for various piracy activities. And same way, Southeast Asia is also notorious for it. And all these regions, there are many big nations also fall into security issues. Say, for example, USA, UK, France. You have, Russia doesn't have one, but China, right? So many new and big countries, they try to have their presence in Indian Ocean with some bases. Okay, so naturally the security dynamics changes, right? And sea lanes of communication is a very important aspect, because without sea lanes of communication, the uh, transport and communication industry slumps. So here there is a huge maritime competition between the large countries, USA, UK, France, China, etc. Even Russia is keen in introducing itself in the market, right? So that's how it is. And the presence of Chinese, the notorious Chinese, they have their own policy of salami slicing and cabbage strategy. What is salami slice? Salami slice is nothing but divide and conquer. Okay, so you try to divide the territories, countries, wedge differences between them, and conquer one country. So that we call it a salami slicing policy. And using this salami slicing policy only, they try to have the string of pearls, which you actually learn in foreign policy, string of pearls policy. So this is salami slicing. Whereas cabbage strategy, as you see in the picture, the cabbage has some layers. Okay. So what China does, especially in South China Sea, they have some territory. Say if it is Partly Island, Paracel Islands, they will establish naval areas, bases in layers, protecting these, what do you call, the inner core. So that we call it as cabbage strategy. So it's a more of stacked defense policy, where they try to protect a particular or encroached area through variety of layers of naval protection. So Chinese salami slicing and cabbage strategies have to be countered, for which India needs a better maritime security. And apart from that, we need to have some delimitation issues in the maritime boundaries. So the exclusive economic zone, the territorial waters, international waters, there are some disputes in certain countries between India and those, like with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and so on. So all these delimitation issues with respect to maritime boundaries, using the UN law on Convention of Seas, has to be done and expedited. So in that way, these problems are there at large, and we have these issues coming up, right? Then comes environmental threats. As far as environmental threats are concerned, the plastic circulation, especially, say for example, from Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, the plastic waste in the sea travels to Indian Ocean, affecting Andaman and other fertile ecosystem of India. So these type of security issues are there, environmental threats are there. Climate change vulnerabilities are there. When there are 7,516 kilometers of porous areas, it means they are exposed to all climate-induced issues, and asymmetry in water governance is there across countries, and climate-induced migration happens. So we need certain issues or security perspective in that aspect. We have maritime terrorism. What we had in Mumbai attack, they came through maritime, and there are many maritime attacks and maritime terrorist issues what we face at large. And we have maritime crime also, transnational crime like drug trafficking, illegal trades between the Golden Triangle and the Crescent happens there, and degradation of critical habitats in Indian things. Say, for example, there are many people from many countries like China and Far East. They come to Indian Bay of Bengal and fish. Deep sea fishing is involved. which may endanger our fishing habitats. So in that way, unreported, unmindful fishing, so unsustainable fishing happens in Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, which we have noticed it, and it's a serious threat about it. So all these aspects are new security dynamics, which we have been facing for some decades, and we need to address them through the maritime security. So that's the reason why maritime security is very, very important. And for that, we have a separate maritime doctrine. So we don't have a naval, I mean, we call we Air Force doctrine or Army doctrine, but we have a naval doctrine or maritime doctrine. It was first published in 2004 and later revised in 2009. And this 2009 Indian Maritime Doctrine is updated in 2015 as ensuring secure seas Indian maritime security strategy. So that is the difference between doctrine and a strategy. Doctrine is something, a principle in which it is going to happen, or some paperwork or methodology which they prescribe. But strategy is something which is planned, it is implementation, it is action, and so on. So in that way, the maritime policy or maritime doctrine has been introduced, and we are having it, and we try to use it. And the entire maritime doctrine has been documentized, and it has been implemented by Indian Navy. And this Indian Navy is the one which is assisted by Indian Coast Guard, Marine Police, and other central and state agencies in guarding these porous borders, right? So in all these aspects, we have this particular policy, what do you call, uh, overall security aspects of this system, in which it shows the importance of maritime doctrine as such. Clear? Right. So we have some coastal security schemes also. You can find that under coastal security scheme, we strengthen the police force of the coastal states. We call them as maritime police force or marine police. For that, the centrally sponsored schemes are operating. But the thing is, many states, among the 9 states and UTs, they are coping up in a differentiated performances. Tamil Nadu was largely participating in maritime police stations and so on. When the scheme was introduced in the early days, it was one of the states which taken up the issue at large, and we quickly upgraded ourselves for policing and modernizing the policing. And community interaction programs with the fishermen settlements, hamlets, and other coastal population for security aspects. We issue biometric ID cards for fishermen who venture into high seas. We also have GPS systems for tracking the vessels, and we have special GPS signals which we use to communicate to them with respect to security. And they also can inform in case if they witness some fishy thing in the sea. So unknown fishing boats and so on from other countries or so on, they can actually communicate to the nearby marine police or coast guard through GPS systems. Then international ship and port facility security guidelines are provided for across 227 non-major ports in India and the 12 major ports in India. So we have some security perspectives, how these are things. See, simple. A garbage can be just dumped and go out from Indian coast. At times, many times happens in Tuticorin. Thoothukudi port witnesses that just medical waste, biological waste, and so on, it will be dumped in the port. So it can happen. So all such facility security issues, guidelines have been issued. And we also have single point mooring. What is single point mooring? Say, for example, if a buoy is anchored, that's if a ship is anchored and offshore things are done. So everything can be done in a single point. That is a transshipment and all the issues with that. We also have some geoinformatic systems which are used to map the coast and coastal police station and so on, integrated check post. For that, we have Land Port Authority of India, where the ports authority, they coordinate between the customs and everything. Say even yesterday, the Minister for from the Tamil Nadu government has criticized that the ports are now becoming the hubs of drug trafficking, especially the private ports. So it becomes a security, a very high security threat. So this is how the coastal security happens in this way, how this problems come in. Okay, so definitely privatization helped us, no doubt about it. But privatization also becomes a security threat for India because um, for Tamil Nadu, the drug trafficking happens from Vijayawada port, Vizag port, Visakhapatnam port. In Vizag port, there are some private ports. Okay, so in private ports, it's a private authority which they actually do, and they do it. In Gujarat, there is a large-scale private ports. So trafficking happens, and there are news leaks here and there, though it is not bombarding news which is in the mainstream because of certain political and other issues. We can see that there are certain issues with respect to private ports. So we need to regulate them. Think there are coming up with the private airports, private ports, private railways, stations, right? So in that way, you can see that threats can happen in many ways. You may ask question that if it is a government, then whether it is not going to be a security threat, definitely. But in private, it's even more opaque. At least for government, we have some mechanisms that public scrutiny is possible, whereas for private, it is definitely not going to be possible. At that time, the national security is at stake. So this is how these are. So privatization has to take into consideration the security issues at the large scale, at the larger interest public, which has its own import. Clear? So these are some issues with respect to the border and coastal security. So now we move on to organized crimes. So border issues are there. Already border has some issues. Now the second more important problem is organized crime. So what is that crime and organized crime? Is there an organized crime? Yes. So sometimes a crime may be unplanned. So it will be just happening on that particular time at the instance. That's all. So there won't be any organization or planning as such. That won't be a much a serious threat because it happens once in a while. But organized crime, it is a crime which is done by a organized group or an organization which does it for a commercial benefit, economic benefit at an organized scale at a consistent strategy. Okay, so in a consistent way they try to do. So in that way, it's going to be one of the most serious threats what we have because it becomes a source of all other aspects, some other of crimes. So the core organized crime activity supplies illegal goods and services to n number of citizens. So that's a problem. And the main motive is to have economic profit or monetary gains through illegal means. So why it happens? It happens because of various causes which we have already discussed in the initial classes. So that those causes is same. And say causes for almost all these are almost common causes are almost same. So it may be poverty, unemployment, corruption, poor governance, lack of education, globalization impact, which creates some social divide, urban divide, that is development divides. Then strategic location of a particular country. Say India's position is a problem for drug trafficking because it is situated between two drug uh, consumption area. There is one producer, another one is consumption area. So naturally, organized crimes thrive. So there may be some geostrategic location issues also. So in this particular organized crimes, we actually classify them into two parts. Okay, one is traditional and non-traditional organized crimes. Another one is domestic and transnational organized crimes. Okay, there can be many permutation and combination. There can be traditional domestic, there can be traditional transnational, there can be non-traditional domestic, non-traditional transaction, whatever it may be. So uh, basically, we can have it in two categories. One is traditional and non-traditional. Another one is domestic and transnational. We'll see all the four how it is, right? So, what are traditional and non-traditional organized crime? Traditional organized crimes are those organizations they involved in bootlegging, that is illicit liquor trade. Okay, Araks and Hooch, they try to illegally manufacture the liquor, like what it happened in Gujarat, Bihar. Hundreds of people they died because of these problems, right? Bootlegging. Okay, so this is one important factor. It was once in even in Tamil Nadu we had such a huge organized crime. When I was in school, I will witness in nearby mountain regions. They will just manufacture liquor illegally in the mountain tops, and they through two-wheelers and vehicles they try to have a huge rubber barrels. They try to carry those rubber barrels publicly through the roads where we can witness them, and they just sell. Okay, so later, um, slowly, when things changed, when government banned private liquor, so ultimately the bootlegging menace stopped, because here the bootlegging may result in massive death because of using methanol, right, spirit, and so on. So which may result in kidney failures, blindness, and so on. There are many, even death, right? Then comes betting and gambling. So betting and gambling can happen anywhere across the scene. So that's how things are. And the next important thing is extortion. So extortion happens at all levels, from all communities and all schemes. It can be of terror, or it can be non-terror activity where extortion can happen, which is the base for rowdyisms and so on. Then kidnapping for ransom, kidnapping a person for getting a ransom. Then organized prostitution, smuggling, dacoity, murder, riots, okay, organized riots, and so on. So organized riots may be any type. It may be religious, non-religious, or political, whatever it may be. Organized riots can happen. All these are traditional. Whereas non-traditional, there are many such things like contract killings. Previously, there were killings, right? Murders. But it was not a planned murder. It was, that is, the rivalries will be there, so they will murder. Whereas now, they hire and kill. So hire and kill is a concept. So I can hire a group of people to kill a person. Okay, so that we call as contract killings. Uh, Especially the regions of Mumbai, which has underworld. So that was famous for contract killings. And later, even in films, you can see a Mumbai contract killer came and killed, or they hired from Mumbai and so on. So those areas where they had the underground dealings, they could have this particular contract killing. And then comes illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is a new thing where they try to force people to migrate from one country to another country illegally. Apart from that, they have human trafficking. So human trafficking happens at large. And then we have light arms, that is guns and so on. Okay, and then we have money laundering, counterfeit currency, hawala, okay, drug trafficking, narco-terrorism. All these are certain aspects what we have in this regard. Um, what do you call the uh, your non-traditional crimes. So now, even now, we have some organized riots, but it happens on happens through social media also. You can see many riots were organized by social media or through social media, and the riots will happen on ground, but the mobilization will be done through social media. Yeah, so it can be possible. And as far as organized crime is concerned, you have different components. So three components form a major part of organized crime. One is the criminal group, then protectors of the criminal group, then the specialist support for the criminal group. So who are the criminal group? Criminal groups are the gangsters. So we have Mumbai gang, Dawood gang, Chota Raj gang, so on. So we have gangs. There are established around 5 to 10 gangs across India, right? So these gangs will have their own rivalries, they have their own hierarchy, they have their own structure, membership programs, and so on. the most important aspect of the criminal group is that continuity, because even when the leader is uh, killed or they die, the next in the hierarchy comes to the head of the leadership, and they have a continuity in the criminal group. That is one important aspect. Then they have a very strong hierarchical structure, and this structure is very strong that it doesn't dismantle, and they recruit members from among their own tribesmen, right? Either through religion or caste or region or whatever it may be, or some common criminality. So they try to have their link and recruit people, and they involve in all types of criminality, and they involve in very high violence because fear is a basic weapon what they have, and their goal is to have more profit and power. Okay, so they need to enjoy the power, they need to have a grandiose life with the underworld dawn, kind of. So that's how it is. Okay, so that's the idea of a criminal group. So when a criminal group is formed, another rival criminal group can be there, so which will involve in gang war, or these gangsters involve in different methods of linkages with terror and so on. So these criminal groups can have a network, and these network can join the network of or enable the network of a terror group also, right? So how these criminal groups operate? These criminal groups operate through protectors. So who are these protectors? The corrupt officials, the corrupt attorneys, and businessmen. So the corrupt public officials, they try to protect, they don't take any actions on these criminal group because they are corrupt by them. And attorneys, they will be the advocates and lawyers, they try to provide the legal support for them, get everything legally done. And businessmen who involve in business with them, they try to have the shadow business with these guys. So these are protectors. And these criminal groups need some specialists also. Why? Because the specialist is, say, for example, there may be some chemical weapon which they are going to develop. They need a chemistry specialist, physics specialist, botany specialist, geography specialist. So they have some specialist support. So similarly, they need social support. Social support they try to have through social party. They try to showcase that we can have a glamorous life and so on. These protectors, supporters, and other peripheral members will be happy in the social support schemes what they have. So this is how an organized crime operates. And this organized crime is nothing but a co-joint twin of terror. Okay, both have a symbiotic relation because terrorism cannot operate at large networks. Okay, it can operate within a particular restraint, whereas these organized crimes provide the roots of the terror. Okay, so terror, if it is going to be the stem on the leaf of a tree, the roots are going to be organized crimes, right? Or criminals. So they have a very high symbiotic relationship. They manufacture goods, they supply to terror. The terror people, they supply money to them, and so on. And both have organized syndicates, right? So these organized syndicates or established network will be their strength for both aspects. So these networks communicate with each other and have a very good symbiotic relation. And they mutually enjoy the monetary support, and they have the transnational character because from India, they can operate in underground. They will just have all our transactions in another country. They can just have some linkages at last. And organized crime acts as a source for arms and explosives for terror activities, and both can involve in destabilizing a country as a whole and economy in specific in large scale. So this is how the conditions can happen. Conditions can go in this particular order as such. Clear? Fine. Then comes the problems in controlling effects. Okay, so how to control these organized crimes? Why we couldn't control? Because we have inadequate legal structure to accommodate these type of underworld or shadow aspect, and we have really difficulty in obtaining the proof because they all happen underground, and we have the protectors who shield them. And as far as criminal jurisprudence is concerned, very slow pace of trials and low conviction rate gains the control of these criminal syndicates. And we have lack of resources and training with respect to and coordination issues. as Vora committee established the criminal syndicate, political bureaucratic nexus, and duality criminal. That is, dual criminality is nothing but transnational. 2 or 3 countries may involve, so it will be difficult in combating them. Okay, but anyway, in order to combat, you need to strengthen the criminal laws. We need to have coordination between the security forces. We need to have specialized units for unearthing these organized crimes. Um, International cooperations, political commitment is lacking that we need to, public awareness has to be improved, mass media, the role of media is very, very important in unearthing certain things, but it's so sad that it doesn't happen because again, there is a problem in mass media. As far as mass media is concerned, the mass media is now controlled by a group of syndicates. So that itself is a problem, right? Almost in all states, this is the affair. So if I control media house and that media house will not report uh, any issues related to me, so that's a problem. Okay. So likewise, we have many such issues, which second ARC also has highlighted many. How to they gave a good recommendation on part of how to combat the organized crime, right? So one of the most important organized crime is drug trafficking. Drug trafficking is the single vulnerable, single disastrous activity next only to left-wing extremism. So it is, to be frank, it is real. That's a reality, right? So uh, as far as drug trafficking is concerned, it's a major transnational organized crime what we have in India, and we have narco terrorism also, where the narco substances are sold, and out of the money the terrorists thrive, right? Why in India we find such a huge amount of drug trafficking? You know that more than 30 tons of uh, what do you call the um, narcotic substances have been there, reported in Kandla port in Gujarat. They said in Ministry of Home Affairs in Parliament said that in Sikkim they captured around 65 or 68,000 kg, uh, 68 tons of narco substances. But no news appears, no actions taken, nothing in that way. So we could see such a huge nexus happening there, right? So in this way, India, location between the Golden Crescent, that is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and the Golden Triangle, which is Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. In that way, we have this particular problem in the northwest and northeast. India is in the middle, so naturally we are into this particular problem. And the international borders are very porous, and lack of strict vigilance is there, and this is used up by the Southeast Asia's main opium producing region, that is the Golden Triangle. So apart from that, we have very strong ethnic unity, which is misused by the insurgents and the criminals. Because say in the Northeast, if the tribes are there, if they are infected to drug usage, they'll be very strong ethnically not to disclose the person who involves in this. Okay, that's a problem what it is. And apart from that, the poor state of education in the northeastern condition, unemployment, poverty, and so on in northwestern region. So naturally, it enables it. And India is a pharma capital of the world. You know that. As far as pharma capital of the world, some pharma products like pethidine and so on, they can be easily converted into drug abuse, a drug to be abused, right? So API, the active pharma ingredients, can be easily manipulated to convert it into a narco substance. So in that way, this is also done. Misuse and abuse of some pharma products or pharma companies, the garb of pharma companies, they try to involve in these thing. And that's the reason why we also said or discussed yesterday how it turns to a white collar crime, right? Even the high professionals, they have nexus with these drug trafficking group. Okay, and the implication is very worse because it undermines the socio-political stability. Say, India has demography, or India has something which is a young population, right? So this young population, the youth and young adults, if they are exposed to drug at large, so naturally that will be ended up in a massive social loss, right? So that's a problem because it takes the entire youth life, and their contribution to the GDP and development of India is hijacked. And drug using increases HIV also, because when they use syringe, right? So there are issues which happen with syringe, and ultimately they ended up in this particular problem. One syringe, single syringe used by many in the group, so it involves in HIV prevalence. You know that this HIV prevalence is happening at large. Even a couple of months before, few people they reported HIV symptoms, especially between the age of 20 to 21 to 25. But it was a shocking revelation that these youngsters, they were shattered because they said they didn't have any affairs, they didn't have any blood transfusion, they are not drug abusers, nothing, but they were infected. But when inquiry happened, because when the body examination happened, and when the doctors asked about tattoos, these people have said, yes, we did it in the fair, right? That is in the village fairs and so on. So in village fairs in North India, there is a fashion that there will be tattoo guys. They will put tattoos and so on. So in that way, what happened? These tattoos were done in that region. There are one or two people coming from this region. There are two or three people in other regions. So many of them, it's all about tattoos. So at the end of the day, tattoo from the common folk, we don't know how many people have been affected, because in that fair there would have been many people who would have been tattooed. So only few had come up, whereas now the things will happen in this worst case. So this is how the spurt of think how the youth will be. The already it is stigmatized, and now the life of the youth is under question. So this is how the problem is in the social. It definitely shatters the entire social aspect of the society, right? And children are now forced to use as drug carriers, right? Child labor, radicalization is easy, and the region becoming the hub of drug trafficking is easy. All these are some of the serious problems what we have. Say you can see drug trafficking involves such a huge implication in all sphere, from children to the senior system, right? So it's a very, very notorious menace which we need to curb. And that's the reason why even when you see even a state like South India, Tamil Nadu and other states, they strongly uh, have the voice against drug abuse. That means the seriousness of the problem is very high, right? But it is not discussed in the main media, mainstream. It is not putting up because of certain other issues of political and other nature. That's a problem behind this drug trafficking in India, right? And as far as the security issues, what it happens, India may convert into a drug corridor, okay, and it will be an easy source for insurgency. Already we have insurgencies in many areas. All these can use this as a source of income, right? And illicit drug cultivation can have a serious environmental damage because they can't cultivate here. They go for pristine areas. Okay, so in the mountain regions and so on, where it is inaccessible, where they clear the forest and cultivate. So that will be environmental disaster. And alarming drug use by Indian youth, demographically, we lose much, right? Fine. So what are the measures we take up against these drug trafficking? Drug trafficking, we have some conventions which are listed here. We all have some acts which are there. national, I mean, we have national level, we have Narcotics, Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act. We have Prevention of Illicit Trafficking of these Substances Act. India is signatory to all 3 UN conventions on narcotics. And we have some intergovernmental initiatives between India, Myanmar, India, Bhutan, Nepal, same way. And we try to use voluntary organizations, helpline and rehabilitation of drug addicts and so on. But still, see, the problem is that we are having more in the other side, rehabilitation. We are not more in, we have very less in the prevention side. We are weak in this, okay? Though we have some quite a huge number of rehabilitations here. So that's a major problem in drug trafficking. Fine. So this drug trafficking can be a major issue with respect to transnational crime. It's a best example of transnational crime. All crimes can be transnational if it is involving more than 1 or 2 states. Okay, fine. So UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime defines a transnational offense if any one of these character is accepted with. If a crime is committed in more than 1 state in the sense 1 country, okay, more than 1 country, then it can be called as transnational organized crime. If the crime is committed in 1 state, but substantial part takes place in other, then also it can be considered as transnational. Say, for example, production alone is in a country, all other happens in another country, then also it is transnational. If it is committed in 1 state but involves in an organized criminal group from another state, production, consumption, sale, everything happens in 1 particular country, but it is involved by a group from another country. Okay, say for example, there are some people in Pakistan, they organize drug trafficking in India alone. They manufacture drug in India, sell it in India itself, but they are doing from Pakistan. So we call it as transnational crime. If it is committed in 1 state but has a substantial effect on another state, then also we can call it as transnational. So either of the 4 or more than 1, whatever it may be, it can be called as transnational organized crime. So in this transnational organized crime, you can see that it therefore affects international borders. Okay, it can cross or it can affect the international border. But what is the difference between domestic crime and international crime? Domestic crime means it will happen only within the particular single national jurisdiction. Okay, so that you can easily identify. But what is the difference between transnational and international crime? So transnational is one from one to other, whereas international crime, it can happen only within a particular country itself or across the world states. Either way it can be. But the thing is that it should be recognized in the international law that the offense committed can be considered as offense against the world community. Say, for example, a crime against humanity. Say, ethnic cleansing. Say what happened in Sri Lanka. It's a war against humanity, right? A fundamental right, a human right is being violated completely. War crime, genocide, ethnocide, whatever it may be, that we call it as international crime. Say if Russia is completely ruining the civilian of Ukraine, we call it as under the law, world community is being harassed, so naturally it is going to be international crime. Say for China, if it is having some Uyghur crisis, Uyghur are population within China, China commits crime upon them, then also we can call it as international crime if it is crime against declared as crime against humanity, because it's a large scale attack on a particular group, ethnic group. Clear? So that's how it is, what we are. Clear? So this we have already seen, just for a reference, how the transnational crime across borders happen. So we have seen many these linkages in the initial classes itself. Clear? Now, what is that transnational crime and its categories? Transnational crime can involve in transnational crime involves in illicit goods, illicit services, or infiltration in the business or government. That is getting into the business and government, just hijacking the entire system. Goods means they will involve any good, maybe drug, cultural property, currency, environmental aspects, arms, terrorist activities, all these are goods, right? And other offenses committed by any organized crimes. Otherwise, we have services, that is trafficking of person, organ, intellectual property theft, insurance theft, bankruptcy, fraudulent bank issues, and so on. All these we call it as transnational crime, okay, in services. Infiltration in business or government, they get into the legal business, they get into corruption of public officials, money laundering, cyber crime, all these businesses and government. So these are different types of transnational crime which we have across the states. Clear? Fine. So so it's the same. Transnational crime is an organized crime. So same like organized crime, what are the factors? They have the same. Okay, but how the transnational crime has to be targeted? Okay, what approach we need to have? Definitely, since it is transnational, we need to have more than one state cooperation. Okay, that is more country cooperation. But we need to start at home. If India is affected by drug trafficking, if you have the golden crescent, if you have the golden triangle, you are in between, you start first. Don't expect these people to check out or do something. First, we need to start. We need to start at home. We need to take some shared responsibility in these crimes. And we need to enhance intelligence and information sharing among the countries which are willing to take actions. We need to protect our financial systems and strategic markets against these crimes. We need to strengthen the interdictions, investigations, and prosecutions across the countries. For that, we need to have some steps, say, for example, extradition treaties, legal assistance treaty, and so on. There are many such treaties which can be signed bilaterally. We have to disrupt the trafficking by disrupting the route. Say, they are manufacturers, they are consumers. Only when they provide it through a route, they can be successful. Disrupt the route. Okay. And build international capacity, cooperation, and partnership against them. So these are some of the approaches which we can have and which we can provide for addressing the transnational crime. Fine. So this is all about your transnational crime. One of the type of transnational crime is environmental, because if I want to destroy a country in a long term, I can target the environment of a country. When the environment of a country is targeted, automatically this particular country can be affected at a long term. Okay, so we have three terms: environmental warfare, environmental terrorism, eco-terrorism. All three are different. Okay, environmental warfare means a warfare by means of deliberate environmental destruction. Okay, that is environmental warfare. Say, for example, if a country wages war against a particular country, if Russia waging war against Ukraine, and if Russia purposefully, deliberately destroys the biodiversity of Ukraine, then we call it as environmental warfare. Okay, that we call it as environmental warfare. It is deliberate destruction of a particular country. For this, we have some UN convention where the biodiversity should not be destroyed. Okay, even during warfare. Same way for cultural terrorism also. You cannot destroy the cultural identities of a particular country in a warfare. So that's how it is. Same way protecting civilians. While you are fighting warfare, your armed persons have to attack only the armed persons. That's all. So that's a basic idea of what we need. So this is one. Whereas environmental terrorism is something, one or more unlawful action that destroys environmental resources, right? Say, for example, within a country, you have an individual or an individual or an organization. They try to destroy environment for their personal gain, right? So that we call it as environmental terrorism. Okay, environmental terrorism means terror activity against environment for personal gain. Okay, for a commercial gain, for their own gain. Okay, within a particular country. Eco-terrorism means in the name of saving the environment, okay, destructing the property, uh, human encroachments, and so on. Say, for example, you have a human settlement in particular area. Okay, maybe the human settlement would have been encroached. Settlements would have been made through encroaching the forest. Say, for example, in Nilgiris. Okay, so now you have settlements. What I do, just to protect Nilgiris, I need to regrow Nilgiris. I demolish all the buildings in Nilgiris in a particular area. Okay, that I call it as eco-terrorism, because it may not be a reversible process, right? Already the encroachment has happened and some damage has been happened. Only the rest of the area can be protected, and it's something the reverse of it which happens, right? So to protect the terror activities and ecological activities and so on, we try to unleash destruction over the human properties. So that we call it as eco-terrorism. There is a slight difference between eco-terrorism and demolition of illegal buildings. Okay, if illegal buildings in coastal zones and so on, we demolish. That is encroachment. But say, for example, if say, for example, in Chennai, we have Pallikarani. Okay, Pallikarani is now a Ramsar site. Okay, originally it was a very large site with thousands of hectares, whereas now it is very few hundreds of hectares. Say, for example, this is a protected site now. This is the entire original site. If we try to destruct all the buildings in this region and we try to re-establish this original Pallikarani, then we call it as eco-terrorism, because you try to terrorize all these people around because it has happened for hundreds of years and so on. Now you cannot do anything, whereas this area you can protect. Okay, here you may try to prevent the environmental terrorism and so on, damages and so on. So this is slight difference what you can have. Okay, so there is a upcoming criticisms on eco-terrorism in many other countries. You can't find it in India, but in other developed countries they are facing this eco-terrorism, right? So environmental terrorism is environment-linked terrorism, which is usually climate change-led fragility. Because of this fragility, we have this particular environmental terrorism which is there. Say, for example, there may be local resource which is very, very less and that is highly competitive. So they try to, say, for example, agricultural land. The population is more, land is very less. They try to demolish the environment and get more land into cultivation. So that is what they try to do, or for commercial purposes, like what Brazil does and so on. Resource scarcity, vulnerability, increased desertification of agriculture areas like in Africa, extreme weather disasters, livelihood insecurity and migration, volatility in food prices, boundary management, hydrological crisis, what it happened in Cape Town and other areas, sea level rise, okay, coastal degradation, unintended climate policies. So all these will create some fragility. So that fragility will create insecurity among the people, and they try to encroach upon certain environmental areas and get that particular share, and so that they can have some resource for survival. Okay, so these aspects we call it as environmental terrorism. Both the concept of environmental terrorism not new, but it is way back 3 decades ago it started, but it's not widespread. Okay, eco-terrorism and so on. Environmental terrorism is there, but we don't recognize or perceive it as terrorism. Now we are perceiving it as terrorism, right? So this is all about what do you call your ideas on border management, organized crime, transnational crime, maritime security, environmental terrorism, etc. Right? Thank you.